Back again, and welcome back to another video within this series. And in this video, I'm going to actually be going back over our router class that we did way back when in some of the very early videos that we've done. And I just want to go in and add a few bits and clear a few bits up and show you how we can use this route within our controller classes to extract the different parameters that we've defined, so we can then go ahead and build more dynamic routes. So without further ado, we're going to jump straight into it. I said I haven't really got a big plan for this video. I'm just going to go through it and show you a couple of stuff, because I had a comment last night about how we can add additional functionality with this route. So I want to go ahead and I want to show you how we can actually make these routes dynamic and extract the different parameters that we've defined within our router.yaml file, and how we can get access to those within our controller. It's dead simple. I'm going to quickly go over it so you guys can see how it works, because I know I've not touched on this one yet. So we're going to go over it, see it works, and you're going to be surprised how simple and easy it is. So before we start, I want to take you back to our router class, and actually let's look at our config or routes.yaml. And you can see that we've only defined two routes within this at the moment. We've got a route that's not got a name, it's just a empty string which denotes our home page, because you can see that our controller is pointing to a home controller and our action is pointing to the index action. So if I open up the app controller and open up our home controller, let's change this for you so you can see a lot better. So you can see that we've got our home controller and we're extending that base controller class. We've got that index action method, which is what we're calling by default when we access this route, right? So that's a basic route. These are routes that we can access because they're hard coded in. These are like hard coded routes that we've put in, right? So you can imagine if we've got a lot of pages within our website or app or application, you can imagine how this might become convoluted and very heavy in terms of the amount of different routes that we're defining. So we're not going to be doing that. We're going to be making our routes dynamic, and whatever namespace that we've defined, whatever route we've created under that namespace is going to be dynamic. So I'm going to actually go ahead in the router class and show you where we're actually converting these dynamic routes into actual routes, right? So let's go into our controller class, which is going to be in our source directory, and scroll down to router, right? So I've added these two lines of code in, and I'm going to uncomment them, and we're going to go ahead and add some routes within our YAML file and then test it in our browser and see what we're getting back. So and all these are doing is that we're using regular expression to convert any sort of like controller or action that we've wrapped in curly braces, and we're converting them to dynamic route that we've then declared under a particular namespace. And that's all it's doing. Right, I'm not a regular expression expert, but I know this works because it's something that I've been using for a while. So it's dynamic in what's doing. You can see we've got curly braces right here, and anything in between those curly braces is what we're allowing, like A to Z. So your controller can only be letters and no numbers. Same for your actions. And the bottom bit is where we've put in a dynamic token, and that could be a dynamic ID or whatever string that we want to call that particular token. We can set that up, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to show you exactly how it works. So at the minute, this is where we left off. If I bring my page back up, this is where we left off in our last video when I was demonstrating pagination and stuff like that. But we're going to be doing something completely different in this video. I want to show you how we can get these routes or the different parameters of our route that we've created. So refresh that, nothing happens, which is normal. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a route between our routes.yaml file, then we're going to go ahead and test it and see all the parameters that we can then print out, right? So this is using regular expression, which is going to be converting anything that we've declared after a namespace and allow us to create as much controllers as we want and have these routes created for us dynamically, right? So I'm going to go into my routes.yaml file and I'm going to add in a dynamic route, and I'm going to make this one a admin route because eventually we're going to be putting an admin system within this. So this is how we declare routes that's going to be dynamic. So we're going to start by saying admin / curly braces. I'm going to put controller / curly braces action, right? And that's like the key of this particular array. Or if it was PHP, this would be the key, and what we put at the bottom is going to be a next key that's going to declare a value. So the parameters that we're going to define on this particular route is namespace, right? And we're going to call that admin. So whatever route we've defined or declare under that namespace is going to be dynamic. And let's actually test that out, because if we go to admin, and for arguments, let's just make up something. Say admin user index. Obviously, we got an error because we have not got that controller, that we've not created a admin directory with a user controller. So let's do that and see what happens. So go into our app folder, go into our controllers directory. I'm going to create a new directory called admin. Within that, I'm going to create a new file called user controller.php, right? And I'm going to do the same thing like I normally do to declare strict type equal. This is like common practice now. I'm pretty much just writing this out whenever time I create a new file. Again, it's good to practice these things because they then stick. So I'm going to namespace this. I'm going to say app because I'm in the app directory. Controller, I'm in the controller directory, and I've just created that admin directory. So I'm going to say backtick admin, right? So that's our namespace. So I'm going to say class user controller, and I'm going to extend into that base controller. So extend base controller. Click enter and it brings it in for us automatically, which is cool. So if you remember back into our router class, take you back there, let's just save this file. In our dispatch method, when we're creating those new controller objects right here, we're passing in those parameters, which is this argument. We're passing that into the constructor of any of our controller classes, right? So if I go back to this, I can create a public construct method, and I can then get that parameters argument that we've passed in. So I'm going to say public construct, or public function should say construct, and that argument is an array. It returns an array of parameters. So I can set a data type to array and say route params, right? And because I've extended into our base controller, I can then pass the parameters, or pass those parameters to our base constructor. So I'm going to say parent construct route params, right? So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to try and access this route again, and obviously we're still not going to get anything because we have not yet created that method. So let's just create that action method first. So it's going to be a protected function, and it's going to be index action. I'm just going to echo out a string. I'm going to say we are now within the admin namespace, like that, right? If I reload this page, we should be getting this string. There we go. You can see it fine. So there we go. So we've created a dynamic route, because you've noticed we've not actually put this user control file within our routes.yaml file. We've pretty much declared a admin, and we've declared some dynamic controllers and dynamic action, and we're using regular expression to convert those down under the namespace admin. We're using the expressions to convert whatever route we passed in. And obviously, because these are dynamic routes, we won't be able to get them within our routing table because they're not physical routes. These are physical routes. We can print a function. I'm going to actually create a method and return those routes so you can see what it looks like. So if I come down to the bottom and say public function get routes, and I'm going to return this routes. And remember, this routes property is something that we've declared at the very top of the page, which is this protected array. And that's basically assigned in this add method. We're adding all of our routes to this routes property, so we can then return it within this method, because it's a protected method. We cannot access it outside the class, but we can access it if we return it within a method, right? So save that. Let me go to my index page, close these up, and demonstrate something, right? Index, you can see that we've already, in one of our last videos, we've already set up these route handler. If I just take that off, just cancel that off, and for demonstration purpose only, I'm going to do router equal new magma, and it's going to be, we've got router up top already. We've got this router already, so we're going to use that. So we're going to say new router, and router, and I'm going to say get routes, right? And let's wrap that into a var dump. Get routes. Let's go back to our own page and let's see what. So we're getting an empty array because we need to declare some routes. So I'm going to declare some routes and show you exactly what we're doing. So router add, because this is how we add routes in, by using this add method. And the first is going to be an empty string denoting our home page, and we're going to declare the parameters as a second argument. So I'm going to say controller, which is going to be home, an action, which is going to be index, right? So we do a var dump. You see, we've got that route within our actual get routes method that we've just returned. So it's returning that regular expression, and it's returning all those parameters. So that's effectively how we're adding routes, but I have already done all the hard work. If you look back into our router file, our router directory, and within our router factory, I'm already doing all of that for you guys already, because I've already taken those routes within that YAML file, and I'm basically doing a for each loop on them and adding those routes in via that add method. I've added those in already, so there's no need to use that add method anywhere else because I've already done it. All thing that you need to do, or I need to do, is to add our routes like this within these YAML files, right? So that's basically what that looks like if it was doing it manually. But again, there's no need to do that manually. So yeah, so the next bit I want to show is how we can actually get those parameters within our controller, because we've already got them in our controller by default. They're already there. So if I take you back to this user controller, I can do something simple as echo this route params, and I can echo out the controller of this class, which is simple as putting in controller. And if we go back to our admin user index file, user index route, let's just take this off actually, because we won't be able to see what we're doing. Let's just get rid of that, set our route back up the way it was, save, then reload. You can see we're getting user because that is the controller class that we're in. If I echo out action, it should echo out index because that's the method that we're in. Just like that. So this is how we get access to the routes. So obviously we've not declared any sort of like IDs or anything like that. We've only declared a controller action route. So we can now go ahead and actually put in a much more dynamic route within our router.yaml file, which is going to allow us to extract out stuff like IDs and stuff like that. So if I take you back to this route.yaml, I'm going to add in another admin route, but this time it's going to contain a dynamic ID. So again, it's going to be similar to what we've done before. So it's going to be admin / curly braces controller / curly braces / curly braces, and it's going to be action, right? And within this curly braces right in the center is where we're going to define that dynamic ID. And all I'm going to do that is I'm going to assign the string ID : I'm going to say square brackets, and I'm going to say tick DA -F, and outside the square bracket I'm going to put +. And that's basically going to fetch any dynamic number that we pass in to our route. It's going to assign it to this ID string, right? So now we've got this ID parameter that we can then access from our controller class. So I'm going to demonstrate. Put colon, and I'm going to assign it the same namespace as what we've done before. So it's going to be namespace, and it's going to be admin, just like that, right? So if I go back to my user controller, I can then simulate a edit route. So I'm going to say protected function edit action. All right, I'm going to say echo, this is the edit, our admin edit route. So if I hit that edit route, you see we're getting that text that I've just printed out. This is the admin edit route, but this obviously this is not how you would define an edit route, because an edit route denotes that we want to edit something, and if we're going to edit something we need an identifier, right? So how I have structured this, I have structured it in a way that I want that identifier to be the second parameter after the controller, and then the action index. Now I should note that it does not matter about the orientation, and let me take you back to what I'm saying. Within this YAML file, I have declared controller, ID, then action. It does not matter how you want to, well, it matters in a way of you can pass the ID at the end, or you could say controller, action, ID, or controller, ID, action. It does not matter. I am going to demonstrate that either way it will work just the same, right? So if I go back to my user controller, I can echo out that ID. So I'm going to say this route params ID. So if I hit that obviously nothing's going to happen because I need to pass in that identifier, and that get passes in just after the controller. So I could say I pick a random number, say 55/ID. Hit enter, it prints 55 because that's the ID within that route, and we've declared ID right there. So that's effectively how we can extract the ID from our route using that ID parameters that we've defined within our routes.yaml file. So I'm going to actually simulate fetching a user from our database using an ID that we're going to pass within the URL. So I'm going to quickly set this up. So I'm going to say user equal user model, and it should be a new user model, actually new user model, and I want to get a single user back based on whatever ID we've passed within our route. So I'm going to wrap this into var dump. Actually, I'm going to say user get repo, and I want to fetch a find object by, and I want to actually pull out a object by ID. So the first argument within this particular method is going to be the conditions. So it's going to declare an array to say ID, and I want to get the ID that we're going to pass within our route. And all we're going to do that is we're going to say this route params ID. Right? So if I reload this page, there we go. We're getting back a user from our database that's got the ID of 55. Now let's change that to say 6. No, we're getting an error because we have not got a user with the ID of 6. Let's try a different ID. Let's try 96. And there we go. We're getting a different user via the ID passed into our route, fetching back down into our database to get that result, get the user by the ID of 96. And again, that's as simple as it is to actually get IDs or get our parameters from our controller. So again, I can demonstrate this route params. We got ID, we got a few. So I'm going to demonstrate something actually. I'm going to say this route params namespace, and namespace is something that we've created this namespace parameter right here, so we can then access it to get the namespace for which we're currently working in. So namespace concatenate / I'm going to say this route params, say controller, concatenate a / and this route params ID, concatenate our next / say this route param action. Hope you can see that. Come on, action. Right, you can see that. Cool. Let's just break it down a bit if you can't see it. Let's get to my next page. There you go. And I'm just going to echo that, and you will see what it prints out. It's pretty much going to print out what you can see in your address bar. So bring that page back up. If I reload my page, there you go. It's printed out the namespace, the controller, or ID token on our action method. So that's pretty much how we are able to build our routes exactly how we want, because we have designed how we want our route to set up, how we want it to look. So within our controller classes, we know exactly what that is going to consist of and how we can actually construct that consistently, so we're not having any issues trying to figure out what is what, because we already know how our route is set up, because we have defined how we want it to look, right? And that's pretty much what I wanted to show you in this video, how the routing works and how you can set it up, how you can use the parameters to get the actual values that you want, so you can then do something different. Again, it's dead simple. It's already built in. It's just I need to go over it with you guys so you can see exactly how it works, and that is something I will be doing. But also I want to start putting projects together and start showing you exactly how we're going to be blending these in, all the stuff that we've learned so far, plus other bits that I've been working on off camera, and something that I want to also integrate into what we're already doing. So that's a quick video looking back over our routes and seeing how we can get the parameters, see how we can actually add routes into our routes.yaml file. And it doesn't have to be admin, it could be whatever you want, as long as you go with a design, a pattern, something that you can stick to, then you should not go wrong. That's it, guys. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next videos coming up very shortly. Hope you have a good evening. Thank you and goodbye.